This is the Aftermarket Radio Network.
Welcome to another episode of Business by the Numbers. I'm your host, Hunt Emrys, CPA with Parmelis & Associates. So I sat down with my client last week, catching up, recapping the way the year's been going and judging on where things went and where things went right, where things went wrong. And ultimately sat down and said, what do you want this business to look like? And his was a little bit longer term goal, as we're going to talk about a little bit later. And I said, that's great. But what are we trying to do this year? Then helping him turn this longer term goal. It's still a short term goal, but to break it down and say, we're about to start 2025. At this point, when I talked to him, it was 2024, but we're here in 2025. What do you want it to look like? And everything else in between. So this week, we're going to go through that. So hopefully you can do the same thing for your business and have a great 2025 as well. Before we get into that, I just want to stop and say thank you to you and the rest of the dedicated listeners. Remember, if you want to hear your question answered on here, have an idea for a future episode, or want to be a guest on the show, shoot me an email at podcast@parmelis.com. And lastly, we cannot forget our dedicated sponsors, NAPA and Promotive, for being such loyal supporters of the show. Remember, if you need a new shop management software, give Trax a call. If you need to hire the next rock star for your team, give Promotive a call. A ton of listeners have already utilized both on there. As always, if you guys have great experiences with Promotive, great experiences with NAPA Trax, not only let them know that we sent you, but let me know so I can share it with others. But yeah, just have to say a special thanks again. This is the first episode of 2025. Trax and Promotive being such loyal supporters of the show for so long, and just want to say thank you to them. And if you want to say thank you to the people that support us, give them a call. Hey, did you know NAPA Trax is on-site training plus 6 days a week support? It all starts when a local representative meets with you to learn about your business and how you run it. After all, it's your shop, so it's your choice. Let us prove to you that Trax is the single best shop management system in the business. Visit them online at napatrax.com. That's NAPATRACS.com. It's time to hire a superstar for your business. What a grind you have in front of you. Great news, you don't have to go at it alone. Introducing Promotive, a full-service staffing solution for your shop. Let them do the heavy lifting and enlist your hiring partner online at gopromotive.com. Just like you guys, I am in some shop owners group online, and probably just like you guys, I sometimes wonder, why am I even in these groups? There's a lot of good stuff that comes out of there. I'll tell you why I'm in there. Hunt, why are you in these shop owners group? Well, I'll tell you, some of you guys will not let me in your shop owners group. Not that I need to be in all of them, but yeah, some of them are more exclusive than others. But obviously, there's correlation between my job and what you guys are doing on a day-to-day. Having my ear to the ground of things going on in the automotive outside of directly like accounting and tax stuff is always cool to hear. And then you also then just see the normal stuff that goes on a shop owners group. Why are my employees complaining that they have to work on New Year's Day? That was a good one. And everything else in between of why no person should ever be paying flat rate, and someone else is going to tell you that is the only way to run a business. But one of the things that really predicated this episode, or really said, honey, you need to do this episode because I think the people are lost out there, came on a post regarding sales. Like a lot of posts on there, I believe that the person that started it just wanted to brag about how good of a year that they did. But a lot of other people chimed in there. And where it went was just really funny to see. And it was really confusing because there was a lot of information being shared, but there was absolutely no information being shared. But the general idea went something like this. How'd your year go? I was up 20%. And this is all sales. I went from $1 million to 1.2. That's awesome. I went from 1.6 down to 1.5. Watch this. I went from $20 million to $30 million and so on. I mean, there was 60 comments on there. Like usual, 10 to 15 were like trolling someone else or saying you're lying or must be nice or something like that. But the thing that made me sit down there and look at this is there are going to be people that are looking at this, and there's going to be shop owners that are looking at this and saying, all these other guys set a target for their sales. I need to do one for myself. Then they start looking at what they did this year. Hey, other guys are saying that they're going to be 20% up. I did $800,000 this year. And so I'm going to go out there and say, I did $800,000 last year. My goal for this year is $1 million. And where'd you get that goal from? You didn't get that goal from anywhere. It's just higher sales than what you are doing now. And it was at that point, between the recent conversation I had with my client and this post, that I said, we need to talk about this stuff. So before we get into how you should be doing this for your business, because we should be setting goals. And ultimately, we are going to have a sales target, but it's going to be the outcome, not the input of this. And really, this is the number one mistake. This is the number one mistake that I see a lot on finances or forecasting or judging your business. What we saw here as far as setting goals. The first mistake is setting a sales goal. You're missing the point of this. We do not care what your sales are at all. And anyone that disagrees with you is missing the point of this. Don't get me wrong. If you don't have any sales, you're not going to have any business. But when someone comes back and says, I did $1 million last year and I want to do $2 million this year. Why? If you're not factoring anything else in, that could be, all right, what if you have $1 million in sales this year and next year you do $2 million, but you're making the same amount of profit? You still want that business with $2 million? For those of you saying, well, Hunt, yeah, I want that one with $2 million. It gives me more opportunities. I could make a bigger business. Let's say that you don't change anything in your business. If you have $1 million business, you go to $2 million, you're going to have twice the employees, you're going to have twice the customers, you're going to have twice the issues. So you're going to have twice the headaches, twice the problems, or twice the potential problems, all to make the same amount of money. I think you get the idea here, but we don't want to set a sales goal. We want to set a profit goal. If your goal is to make $200,000, your next goal should be to do that in the least amount of sales possible. My number one kind of judge of how good of a business owner, shop owner, anyone that is self-employed is what percentage of that money turns from sales to profit. Anyone can make $1 million. Look at that. If Apple came out today and said, we made $1 million this quarter, what would their stock price do? It would plummet. $1 million is nothing because their sales are billions and billions and billions. You have a shop that does $3 million in sales and you put down $1 million of profit. Yeah, you're going to be very, very, very proud of yourself. Efficiency, working smarter, not harder is the whole name of the game here. We are going to set a profit goal. But remember, profit is not an output, it is an input. So we are still going to have to work back to these input figures or sales. If you don't get what I said, we are still going to set a sales target here, but it's going to be calculated based on what we want to make. We are going to calculate our input based on what we want our output to be. I just explained algebra in a really fancy way, and you'll see where that comes in. I'm going to tell you guys this again, but do not forget this one. Who cares what you sell? It only matters what you keep. So this is the name of the game here. I'm going to go down this example pretty much exactly how I did it with my client. And you can do it for yourself. And I'm going to try to mention some things on here that could be different. But like usual, don't get too caught up in these numbers. These labor rates are going to be different than yours. These head counts are going to be different than yours. And really, these numbers are different than my clients because I want to make this a simple, easy, understandable exercise so that you don't figure out what my client should be setting on a sales target. You should be following along with your numbers, your business, your labor rate, your head count to try to be doing the same stuff for you. Maybe just listen to it all this time, start to finish on it, and then go back and try to add your numbers in it piece by piece. However works. How much do you want to make? That is the question. So when I talked to my client and he came back, just like that shop owners group, his first answer was, well, I want to do X amount in sales. And I said, okay, well, we're not going to start like that. How much do you want to make? So this is a two-parter. Depending on what someone says, I generally say when. If it's somewhat of a realistic goal, the when is, Hunt, this is a 2025 goal. But sometimes you might look at this and say, all right, I do want to make this, but I need to be realistic. I should not make this my goal to do this overnight. You could be thinking to yourself, well, Hunt, why would I ever limit myself? If I want to make $500,000 now and I'm making $50,000, why wouldn't I just say I'm going to change this overnight? You can. People have done it. I've seen people with 30, 50, 80, 100% growth. Generally not at scale. These are generally earlier stage businesses, and I've also seen a lot of those go very poorly. Anytime that you're growing more than 30% in this business, it's going to be very, very hard, if not impossible, to do it and do it at a profitable level. The reason is this industry is still very labor intensive. So if you have a 30 to 50% growth, unless you have a massive productivity issue that you're magically fixing, you're probably adding 1, 2, 3 different bodies to the business. Why is that hard? As you guys know, hiring people is very, very hard to find good people. If you use someone like Promotive, you're going to be able to recruit someone hopefully instantaneously and get them into your shop. But just like anything, maybe it's a culture, maybe it's technical. You're not going to know if that person fits into your shop. What are the chances if you need 3 people that you're going to be able to get those on the first 3 shots? Probably pretty low. So if you're looking at this growth, and as we'll talk about this in a little bit on the headcount stuff, but if you're looking at doubling your sales, doubling your headcount on it, there are so many things that need to fall for this to work correctly that you're really going feast or famine here. It could work, but it could also burn out in a blaze of glory and you could lose everything on it. If I have something like that that's a lofty goal, I usually say, if we can blow it out of the water, we can do it this year, great, but we probably don't want to. So let's break this down into a way that is going to work a little bit better. This all depends, and these are just subjective numbers. This is more specifically, I use these numbers for my client, and when we were looking through this, his was very similar. I said, I don't think I want you to see you do this over the next 2 years, and there's one aspect of his that probably makes it impossible, and so we set this up as a 3-year target. How you want to do that is up to you. Maybe you go from $50,000 to $400,000 the first year, then add another $50,000 in profit in the next 2 years. Expectation versus reality, all this stuff is going to come in different than probably what you're planning, but I just break this down very simply. So if we're at $50,000 in profit now and I want to get to $500,000, then I'm going to say, all right, let's do $200,000 this year. Let's do $350,000 the following year. We're going to do $500,000 of profit. My goal to $500,000 or my client's goal to $500,000 is a 3-year plan. If we have a 3-year plan, it all starts with year 1. If year 1 goes to crap, year 2 and year 3 are worthless. Don't worry about year 2. Do not worry about year 3. We're only going to worry about year 1. In a roundabout way, when you were listening to all that stuff and you were listening to those stories, what you need to have right now is, what is your number? What is your number in 5 years? What is your number in 10 years? What do you want to make in profit this year in 2025? Okay, got that number in your head? Awesome. How do we do this? Remember, we set our target for my client and he's going to make $200,000 in profit this year. How do we get there? I'm going to be honest with you. Someone's going to send me a nasty email saying, Hunt, this is not how it works. You're ignoring overhead. You're ignoring people that have different profit margins, et cetera, et cetera. I get it. If you know how to break in, or you know how to back into this number, including your overhead using your specific gross profit target, great, do it. But I'm going to give you a really, really easy way to do this. It's going to give you some round figures. Goal for shop is a 20% net income. If I'm going to do a projection on how I get to a $200,000 net income, I would just take that $200,000 and divide it by 0.2. This is Algebra 101. We know that 20% of our sales, we're shooting for a 20% net income, is going to be $200,000. So we need to solve in this equation of how much in sales would lead 20% to turn into $200,000. And I didn't do this on purpose. I usually do to keep it simple for my simple brain, but that seems like very simple math. So if I want to make $200,000 in profit, and I'm assuming I'm going to be probably running a 20% profit margin while doing so, I need $1 million in sales. If you wanted to figure out that number and you said, Hun, I saw that post on Facebook. I wanted to join in, but I'm a listener. So I knew that I couldn't go in there without any sort of ammunition. Now you can. Go in there, throw your number up on there and say, this is the number I'm going to hit this year. At least why, there's some sense in it, and there's probably some reasoning behind it. But if you just stop there, you haven't done enough. Because again, that is not an input. Sales is not an input. That is still 2, 3, 4, 5 steps away. And also, sales is a terrible target for technicians. Sales is probably a terrible target for our service advisors. And sales is a bad target for our advertisers, other vendors, and things like that. So let's take a look at how we look at this. Can our team handle this? Can our techs handle this? Can our advisors handle this? Can our building handle this? Can we handle this? To be able to look and say, all right, in order to do this, we know stuff is going to break. I want to know what's going to break and when it's going to break so that I can do something beforehand so that I can have calculated, profitable growth and not crazy chaos that generally doesn't lead to profit. This is one where this is not my client's numbers. So if my client's listening to this, I know this is not your labor rate. I did change this around so that it works a little bit better. But these numbers are probably pretty close, a little bit lower than his, honestly. If you're going to yell and say, Hunt, tell your client to raise his labor rate more than whatever, this is not his labor rate. He's doing fine. The first thing I need to do is I need to look at our team and I need to see if they can handle this. And also, like I said, I need to go back and if I'm going to set this, I need to be able to go back to my technicians and talk technician terms with them. Technicians don't talk sales. They don't talk gross profit. Boss, how many hours do I need to hit? Period. What I do on this one, and this is going to be different, but generally most shops run around a 50-50 mix of parts and labor. If yours is 60-40, if yours is 40-60, use a different number. But keep it simple. If you don't know your number, it's 50-50. And so what I do on this is I say, all right, I have $1 million in sales. I want to do an analysis just on the labor side of this. So if I have $1 million in sales, I'm assuming 500,000 is parts, 500,000 is labor. Is that how it's going to be? No, but it's going to be pretty darn close. Also, remember, maybe yours is 45-55. Maybe yours is 53, whatever, 47. Don't get too caught up in this stuff because you're more likely to mess up the math on this stuff and get an inaccurate figure than to get a slightly more accurate figure by using your own sales mix or whatever it might be. Just use 50-50 unless you are absolutely sure and you're good at percentages. After I give you guys that caveat, remember I told you, I'd warn you on where things have gone wrong. And this is one where I've seen a lot of people come back wacky numbers. And I look at this and say, you didn't take algebra, did you? Because I think you missed something somewhere. NAPA was built from the ground up to make your business more profitable and efficient. They provide an extensive set of tools to increase and track profitability in real time. NAPA offers the industry's best post-sale support hands down. They train your people on site. Yes, on site. They also offer remote refresher training 10 times a week and customer support is open 6 days a week. Give them a call, visit them, or join our Facebook community today to learn more. They'll prove to you that Trax is the single best shop management system in the business. NAPA is always customized and tailored for your business, whether you're a one-man shop or a large multi-bay or multi-location company. After all, it's your shop, so it's your choice. Visit us on the web at napatrax.com. That's NAPATRACS.com. Is your recruitment process draining your valuable time and resources? What if there was a partner who could take your recruitment efforts off your plate? Look no further. Promotive is your ultimate solution for hassle-free staffing focused solely on the automotive industry. On the web at gopromotive.com. Promotive understands the challenges you face when searching for the perfect technician or service advisor for your shop. That's why we've developed a platform that takes the hassle out of recruiting. Michelle Tanzi from Euroclinic said, I am a shop owner and recruiting new talent is so time-consuming. Promotive does the majority of the seeking and recruiting. They reach out to the candidates for you, and when they feel they are a good match for you and culture, they make the connection. They follow up throughout the interview process, and we make sure that the candidates are a good fit and the shop is a good fit for the candidates. I admire that they genuinely want both parties to win. They recruited and paired us with a solid B-Tech and Master Tech. Both left a dealership position and are still part of our team. We are very happy with the character and culture match, and both technicians have become valuable team members. Visit our website at gopromotive.com today and join the growing community of shop owners who have found their ideal team members with Promotive. Back to what I was talking about, labor analysis. We know that my team of technicians needs to now generate $500,000 in sales. They don't know how to get there, neither do I, so I need to translate that into hours. What I did on this is I talked to my client and I said, all right, we need to do $500,000 in sales. What is your labor rate right now? And he goes, my labor rate right now is $130 an hour. And so I said, great. So what I do is I take $500,000 in labor sales and I divide it by $130. What I'm trying to figure out is how many hours at $130 do I need to sell to hit my target? This worked out exactly the same as did my client. Different numbers, but exactly the same. When we did this, I looked at this and say, all right, you need to crank out around 3,900 hours at $130 an hour in order to hit the $500,000 sales target. If we're factoring in that a technician works around 2,000 hours a year, I go back and say, how many technicians you got? I got 2 technicians. Well, good news for you is you should be able to hit this with your current team. The thing that you need to realize here is that is almost 100% productivity. What is this client averaging right now? Less than 50%. Just like I was talking about uncomfortable growth for sales, what are the chances you can double the production on your team just by having a pep talk? Probably not realistic. And also, for most shops out there, if you're trying to hit a target, if your target means that your team has to hit 100% productivity, unless your team is doing it now, I'd probably modify my goals. Let me go into a little bit more detail on that comment. If my team is at 50% productivity right now, I am not going to factor that I'm going to fix everything and get them to 100. I'm usually going to use like 75% productivity. I'll explain how that works. When I look at something like this and I say, okay, you got 2 people there. Theoretically, those 2 people at $130 an hour could hit the target, but it's probably going to be a little bit tricky. I think if you want to give yourself some padding on there, we're going to have to look at increasing our labor rate. And in order to get to those figures, we're probably going to have to be closer to $155 an hour on labor rate, not $130. This is where that when comes in. You might look at this and say, ooh, man, that's a $25 an hour labor rate increase. I don't think I can do that right now. So your 1-year plan alone right there might have went to 2 years. Time out. I thought I was going to be able to hit this year. I'm probably not. I'm probably going to have to go 140 this year and 155 next year. So this is a 2-year plan. Now, think you can handle that $25 an hour increase on labor? Rip the Band-Aid off and do it? You now have a target for your team that's about 75% productivity. Very realistic goal for them. You have the right amount of people there, and you're looking at your labor rate and saying, this should work as long as we can do this. One of the things that I'm ignoring in here is effective labor rate. And that's by design because it makes it a little bit more simple here, but it can't be ignored. If your effective labor rate, meaning what you're actually recognizing, not what your door rate is 70, 80% of what your actual door rate, these numbers are going to be skewed and you're going to have to do this differently. I usually don't say factor that in differently. If your effective labor rate is drastically different than your street rate, I would really be looking at, is that actually your street rate, and using your effective number. Most people is pretty close, but yeah. I want to give you a last example, and this one didn't really happen with my client. Well, it did, but I had to kind of mess with the numbers on this a good bit to get it to come up with what I'm trying to say. If we did the same thing and I went down with my client and I said, all right, perfect. We are going to do this. We need $500,000 in labor sales. What is your labor rate? And my client comes back and says, Hunt, my labor rate is $100 an hour. I would probably fall out of my chair. Don't see that very much. I still got a couple in the double digits, but yeah, I mean, we just really don't see that low of labor rates anymore. And this client didn't have it, but hypothetically they did. If they are at $100 an hour labor rate and we need $500,000 in sales, we know that we need to sell 5,000 hours. And so if you are in this same exact situation, you are looking at your numbers, you just came to a conundrum and you realize the amount of hours that I need to sell is more than the amount of hours I have in the building. Remember, this client only has 2 technicians. 2 technicians work 4,000 hours a year. At $100 an hour, this client would need to sell 5,000 hours. It is impossible with 2 people. So this not only can tell you how many hours or maybe what you need to set your labor rate at for your current team, it's also going to show you if you want to hit this goal, you're going to have to add another team member. Now, depending on the growth you have, depending on what's going on and how many changes you're making, it could be something where you say, man, I need to get that person in here now. If I want to hit this goal, I need them yesterday. Maybe it's something where you go, I don't need them right now. I'm still getting these current guys up to speed. They still have a little bit more room to grow, but now I can start looking, right? You can give Promotive a call and say, I want to find the right guy, not just a guy. Doesn't need to be this month, doesn't need to be next month, but by probably May or June, I'm going to need a rock star in there. Not only are you setting a target, you're also setting your operational goals on hiring, firing, changing, labor rates, and everything in between. But now you can go back to your technicians, get them on the same page, and be able to go to them and say, hey guys, this is a realistic goal for you guys because I've done the numbers. I've looked at this. It should work as long as we all kind of stick to the plan. But again, you can't stick to the plan if you never have a plan. So this is why planning is so important. So you got the labor side of it, fairly simple. You're just figuring in there and saying, how many hours at this labor rate do I have? Does this work based on my team members, etc.? And as we get to a little bit later, the team members go into physical space and physical space goes into your facilities. We're jumping ahead there. So let's talk about cars. Because again, just like I said, sales don't matter. Sales do. If you don't have any sales, you don't have any business. And really before that, if you don't have any cars, you don't have any sales. So cars. You can do everything right. If you don't have the car count, you're going to have a terrible business. I'm sorry. That's just that simple. You can't sell anything if you don't have a car to sell something on. How do we unpack this? How do we look at car count? How do we look at ARO? And how does this all kind of factor into our goal here? Right now, this shop is around $500 ARO. So if they're doing around $800,000 a year, they're doing around 1,600 cars. 500 ARO, 1,600 cars a year. What you can do to your service advisor is you can go back to them and say, I don't want to get any new cars. I like our customers and I don't want a single new customer. So we are going to go from $800,000 in sales to $1 million in sales so I can hit my $200,000 profit margin, but I don't want to get any more cars. What is the ARO target for that service advisor? Fairly simple. Instead of doing $800,000 in sales, we're doing $1 million. So we take $1 million, we divide it by 1,600 because we know we have 1,600 work orders. There's 1,600 cars, and we come up with $625. So if you don't want to find any new cars, if you don't want to get any new customers, you could do this with your existing customer base, but you'd have to raise your ARO from 500 to 625. Can you do that? Yeah, absolutely. It really would probably depend on how many things you're doing to improve your ARO already. To get a 25% boost or $125 on that, you probably either have to do something like if you weren't doing digital inspections before, you now are. That's a major change. There has to be some low-hanging fruit to probably have that much of a lift. Also, ARO is something that you guys don't decide. It's something that you guys have been fighting over the last 12 months. We are still in a down economy. People are still broke and they're probably just getting broker by the day. I would not be using this as my way to hit my target. Definitely not in entirety. If you got to go from 500 to 525, do it. Yeah, you don't need any new cars. You can do that for sure this year. To go up 20%, to go up $125. Assuming you guys are doing some of the right things right now, that's a good bit. If you can't do it just on ARO, you're going to have to get new cars. If we look at this kind of both extremes, you don't want to get any new cars, lift your ARO $125. You'll hit your target. You don't want to increase your ARO at all and you want it to stay at 500. Pretty simple. You're going to need 400 new cars. Where did I get that? We know we're at 800,000 now. We're going to $1 million in sales. So we're adding $200,000 in sales. And we divide that by $500 because that's our current ARO. And now we can look at this and say, okay, in order to hit that higher sales goal so that we can hit our higher profit goal, we're going to need 400 more work orders. Depending on which direction you go, now you can go to your advisor's goal is, so if you want to go back to your advertiser and say, I'm not increasing my ARO and I got pretty lofty goals. I need 35 new cars a month. You probably don't need 35 on this. I don't want to get too complicated on this, but if your average customer visits you 2 times a year and all of your new customers come back to visit you, then you only need 200 cars. If your average customer has 2 cars in their household and they come 2 times a year, you only need 100 new customers because they're going to bring both of their cars to you twice a year, which is 4 times. Realistically, you guys have maybe a 50% return rate, 80% return rate on it. But if you're talking to your advertisers, they should have these numbers. They should have these metrics in your CRM. You need 400 more work orders. How many more cars, how many more customers, how you achieve that. That's why you pay the advertisers the big bucks. But either way, depending on which direction you go, you know what targets you have for your advisors. If you have a car count target, if you have a work order target, you know how many cars you need scheduled. Know how many you need to put into a day. What kind of stuff to go back to the advertisers and say you need to increase and where. So now you have the direction, the ammunition to go to your entire team, technicians, service advisors, outside vendors, and really get everyone on the same page. And also, you're going down through this and you're looking at this. You're making sure you're testing the system to say, is this a goal for them or am I marching my team to a dead end where they're going to realize maybe not today, but maybe in June, we've broken the system. And this is actually going to make us lose money, not make more money. If you don't go out there and you say, I'm going to do this and I'm not going to increase pricing, I'm not going to increase markup, I'm not going to increase productivity, there is a very, very real chance that you hit your sales goal and you don't hit your profit goal. I've seen this time and time again. You go from $800,000 in sales, making $50,000. You hit your $1 million goal and you made 60. Great. Is it worth it? Probably not. And at the end of the day, what does this look like on ARO or cars? Similar to the labor analysis, probably a mixture of both. You're not going to be able to get the increase on hours just by increasing your labor rate. You're probably going to price yourself out of the market. And same thing on sales. You're probably not just going to be able to go and get 20, 25% more out of your customer base Probably going to get another 5-10% more out of them and try to get 5-10% more in cars as well. However works for you, however you slice it, either way works as long as you hit your ultimate goal. The other thing, or the last thing on here we got to talk about here, is what happens if you hit a breakpoint, or really what is a breakpoint. The two I'm going to talk about, and they both came up with my client, is service advisors and just physical space or facilities. Service advisors come into play when we're really talking about the labor analysis. My client, he actually doesn't have an advisor right now. He's on the counter, so it's not really a concern for him, but it did when we were talking about his loftier goals, because he was going to have to probably add a fourth technician to get to the number that he wanted. Based on the way he runs his business, he's got one service advisor, him, for 2 technicians. He said, that's fine. I can add another third technician and I can still do this stuff. And ultimately, he wants to replace himself with an advisor. The way his shop runs, he says, this is perfect for one advisor. No reason for anyone else. We were going down through it, and if 3 guys were super efficient on it, he probably had to add another advisor, maybe a part-timer, but hypothetically, it should have been okay. Now, the issue here came is when we were backing into some of his numbers, we realized in order to get there, it was going to predicate having that fourth tech. I think it was like 7,000 hours that he needed, which would be 1,000 over the capacity of 3 technicians. The issue there is if you look at that, we now have 1,000 extra hours, which necessitates us adding another technician, but then we are overloading a service advisor, then we need to add another service advisor. This is a break point right there, and this is a prime example. When you hire a service advisor, let's just say they cost $100,000 a year. They can probably handle 1 technician, 2 technicians, 3. So your sales go from 1 tech, 2 tech, 3. Your advisor cost is just steady right here. At 1 technician, this is really close. At 3, you have a lot of profit. You're having a lot of efficiencies there because it's economies of scale. You got 1 person dealing 3. Group is always going to be more profitable than one-on-one. If we go to 4 technicians, we're going to have to add another advisor. Depending on how much more we have in sales there, are we adding a technician just to pay for the cost of that technician and the advisor? Now, depending on what your labor rate is and how productive this person is, you probably aren't going to lose money by doing this. Like, I think based on the way most people are set up, as long as that technician is getting like more than 17 or 18 hours, probably covering their own costs and the cost of the additional advisor. But yeah, I mean, if you have a new technician, you add that 4th tech and you add that advisor, and that 4th tech does $20 or averages 20 hours a week, I would almost guarantee that you're paying that tech to pay that advisor and no one is making any more money. There is a prime example of one where you could see this in one of these groups where this guy went from 1 million to 1.4. Well, that's great. You never added the context that you had another technician and you had another advisor. So that's great that you went from $1 million, but if I had to guess, he probably did $1 million at 200 grand and then just did 1.4 and made maybe 150 or 200. That is the definition of working harder, not smarter. Does that mean that if you're looking at this and saying, well, Hunt, should I just never hit that? No. And this is where it gets weird for everyone. You could do a service advisor assistant. You could do a customer service person. I get it. The biggest thing I want you guys to keep in mind is that economy of scales. You want to be able to maximize what your advisor can do. So generally, if you have 1 advisor, you want 3 techs. If you have 2 advisors, you probably want 5, maybe 6. You don't want to have underworked advisors because underworked advisors mean inefficient advisors, and inefficient means, well, it doesn't mean profit. It means lack thereof. Efficiency and productivity. Name of the game. Efficiency and productivity are almost interchangeable profit in most cases in most shops. Lastly on here, and another one that when I was talking to my client about that we realized is he couldn't add a 4th technician even if he wanted to because his building couldn't hold it. He's got 2 bays and 1 out back, so he could get 3 in there and is getting by with 2 right now, but to add a 4th would just be unrealistic. He doesn't have any attachment to the building he's in and thought about moving anyways. And by doing this planning session, he looked at this and said, we've always thought about needing a new building and we've always thought about moving. They were actually probably thinking about moving sometime sooner. But when we started looking at this stuff, he said, Hunt, this kind of cemented my idea that I need to move and I need to find a bigger place. And gives me a good idea on what size I need, but it also probably shows me I don't need to rush. I think based on what I'm doing this year and based on what I'll probably do next year, the current facility that we have will be perfectly fine. But now they know they can go out there, they can put out the ads for the right person, knowing that they have some time for this. They can get a real estate agent, put out some feelers so that they can make that move the way that they want to, the way that their customers want, and ultimately, hopefully, in a safer, less stressful, and more profitable way. What do you do with this? Now you combine all this stuff up together and get a target that you can post into those groups yourself. But like I said, hopefully it's one with some meaning behind it and not just an arbitrary number. Remember, at the end of the day, it's not about what you sell, it's about what you keep. Please share with friends. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas for future episodes, shoot me an email at podcast@parmelis.com. Thanks for listening to the Aftermarket Radio Network. You can find all shows on aftermarketradionetwork.com and on your favorite podcast listening apps. So thanks again for joining me on Business by the Numbers. Stay safe out there, and I'll talk to you all next week.
You've been listening to Business by the Numbers with Hunt Demarest on the Aftermarket Radio Network. Follow Hunt on your favorite podcast listening app. Let him know what you'd like him to cover. His email is in the show notes. Hunt is all for advancing the aftermarket.